A loaf of bread carries a gross margin of 50 to 60%. A custom wedding cake can hit 75%. Coffee sold at the counter runs 70 to 80%. On paper, this looks like one of the best margin businesses in food service. And yet, once rent, labor, and the sheer cost of running ovens from before sunrise every single day get factored in, the average bakery's actual net profit margin lands somewhere between 4 and 9%. Before you open a bakery, let me tell you something. The gap between that beautiful gross margin on a croissant and the thin number that actually lands in your pocket at the end of the month is one of the widest in this entire series. And the bakeries that close that gap aren't necessarily the ones with the best recipes. They're the ones who figured out that the product sitting in the display case and the product that actually pays the bills are often two completely different things. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why. Before we talk about money, we need to talk about what a bakery actually is, because almost everyone pictures the wrong business entirely. When you open a bakery, you are not opening a single business selling baked goods. You are opening at least two different businesses under one roof. A retail storefront selling directly to walk-in customers, and, for many successful operators, a wholesale supply operation selling in bulk to cafes, restaurants, and grocery stores. These two businesses have almost opposite economics. Retail carries higher margins per item, but requires marketing, foot traffic, and a pleasant space people want to sit in. Wholesale carries thinner margins per unit, but delivers predictable, recurring orders, paid on standard terms, that require zero marketing spend and can be produced using oven capacity that would otherwise sit empty in the hours before your retail doors even open. And this is a genuinely physical business in a way a lot of small businesses aren't anymore. Most bakery days start between 2 and 5 in the morning because bread and pastries need hours of proofing, baking, and cooling before a single customer can buy them fresh. The romantic image of a cozy bakery hides one of the more physically demanding schedules in this entire series. Here is where the range is genuinely enormous, because cottage food laws in most places create a real, low-cost entry point that barely exists in most other industries in this series. At the very bottom, a home-based operation under cottage food laws can launch for as little as $2,000 to $10,000, limited legally in how much you can sell and often what you can sell, but with almost none of the overhead of a commercial space. A small commercial bakery, real equipment, a real lease, typically requires $15,000 to $75,000 to open. A full commercial bakery, proper ovens, retail build-out, walk-in refrigeration, and enough capacity to genuinely run a wholesale operation alongside your retail counter commonly runs $100,000 to $400,000 or more. Here's the part that catches almost every first-time owner off guard. Commercial ovens alone can be one of the single largest line items in your entire build-out, and unlike a lot of equipment in other businesses, you generally can't scale down your oven capacity to save money without directly capping how much product you can physically produce in a single morning, which caps your revenue ceiling before you've sold a single item. So you've got your ovens installed, your first batch proofing, and technically you're now a bakery owner. Congratulations! Before your first customer walks in, you have a set of problems that a normal retail business simply doesn't have. The first problem is that your product has a genuinely short shelf life. An unsold inventory isn't just lost revenue, it's an ongoing daily cost. A bread business is closer to a perishable goods operation than a traditional retail store. What doesn't sell by end of day is typically unsellable at full price the next morning, and that daily waste has to be built into your pricing from the start, not treated as an occasional surprise. The second problem is that your labor schedule works against normal hiring and staffing patterns. Finding reliable staff willing to start at 2 or 3 in the morning consistently is a genuinely harder recruiting problem than most retail businesses face, and labor typically runs 28 to 36% of revenue, one of the largest cost categories in the entire operation. The third problem is ingredient cost volatility. Flour, butter, sugar, and eggs are commodity ingredients whose prices can swing significantly with almost no warning. And because your margins on staple items like bread are already thinner than your pastry case suggests, a spike in a core ingredient can compress your margin on your highest volume products overnight. The fourth problem is that beautiful, photogenic bakeries are expensive to build and don't guarantee sales. A gorgeous retail space with a striking display case is genuinely valuable for foot traffic and word of mouth, but it's also a real cost that a purely wholesale-focused competitor operating out of a plainer commercial kitchen doesn't have to carry at all. Let's say you've solved the big problems. Ovens running, staff hired, first products on the shelf. Now let's talk about what it costs every month, regardless of how much you sell. Fixed monthly costs for an established bakery commonly run around $18,000, covering rent, base utilities, and core staffing before a single bag of flour is factored in. Ingredient costs typically run 25 to 32% of revenue, and combined with labor at 28 to 36%, those two categories alone can consume 60% or more of every dollar that comes through the register before rent, utilities, or anything else is even paid. And this is the part that quietly separates thriving bakeries from struggling ones. With margins already this thin on a large share of your product mix, a bakery has very little room for waste, inefficient scheduling, or underpriced items. Most new bakeries take 12 to 24 months to reach break-even, and the ones that get there fastest are almost always the ones actively managing both the retail and wholesale sides of the business, not just baking well and hoping the math works itself out. Here is where the bakery business gets genuinely interesting, because the product that makes your storefront beautiful is rarely the product that actually stabilizes your income. Custom cakes and specialty pastries can carry margins of 60 to 75%, some of the richest numbers in the entire business. But they're also unpredictable, seasonal, and dependent on marketing and foot traffic to generate demand in the first place. Wholesale bread and pastry accounts sold to cafes, restaurants, and grocery stores typically carry margins closer to 30 to 45%, meaningfully thinner per unit. But wholesale orders are predictable, paid on standard net 30 terms, require essentially no marketing spend, and critically, can be produced during the same early morning hours your ovens are already running for your retail case. Here's the number that changes everything. A bakery running wholesale accounts alongside its retail counter isn't choosing between a high-margin business and a low-margin one. It's using otherwise idle production capacity, the same ovens, the same early morning labor already on the clock, to generate a second, more predictable revenue stream that smooths out the feast or famine nature of pure retail sales. The bakery that only sells beautiful cakes to walk-in customers is betting entirely on foot traffic and seasonality. The bakery that adds wholesale on top has built itself a floor. There are really two types of people who end up owning bakeries, and their businesses look almost nothing alike. The first is the retail-only artisan, someone focused entirely on the walk-in storefront experience. Beautiful display cases, custom orders, a strong Instagram presence. This owner can capture excellent margins on individual specialty items, but their revenue is directly tied to foot traffic, seasonality, and marketing effectiveness, with real feast or famine swings built into the model. The second is the hybrid operator, someone running a real retail presence, but deliberately building wholesale accounts alongside it, using early morning production capacity that would otherwise go unused. This owner's blended margin per item is lower on average, but their monthly revenue is far more predictable, and a slow retail week doesn't threaten the business the same way it would for a retail-only competitor. Let's run the numbers on a mid-sized commercial bakery, opened for $150,000. While talking about the optimistic scenario, the bakery builds a strong retail following in year one, while also landing 5 wholesale accounts supplying local cafes, using production capacity between 4 and 7 in the morning that would otherwise sit idle. Combined monthly revenue lands around $45,000, split roughly 60-40 between retail and wholesale. Blended net margin settles around 12%, thanks to the predictable wholesale volume smoothing out slower retail weeks. Annual profit lands around $65,000, and the $150,000 investment pays back within 3 years. Talking about the realistic scenario, the bakery focuses entirely on building out a beautiful retail experience, investing heavily in the display case and storefront design, without pursuing wholesale accounts at all. Monthly revenue looks similar on paper in strong months, $38,000, but swings significantly with the seasons, dropping to half that during traditionally slow months, with no wholesale floor to offset it. Net margin averages closer to 5% across the year once slow months are factored in, and annual profit lands around $18,000, barely covering the owner's time. The payback period on that same $150,000 investment stretches well past 8 years. The difference between those two outcomes isn't the quality of the baking. It's whether the business was built around one unpredictable revenue stream or two complementary ones. Owning a bakery is not a beautiful margin business wearing an apron. It's a physically demanding early morning production operation where the gorgeous number on a custom cake's margin sheet rarely tells you what the business actually nets once rent, labor, and ingredient volatility take their share. The $2,000 home-based cottage bakery and the $400,000 full commercial operation are the same business wearing different clothes. A bet that you can turn ovens that are already running before sunrise into more than one revenue stream, before thin retail margins and unpredictable foot traffic quietly decide the math for you. For the owner who treats wholesale as a genuine second engine, not an afterthought, a bakery can settle into one of the more resilient small food businesses in this series. For the owner who builds the entire model around the beautiful display case alone, it's an expensive way to discover that the 75% margin on the wedding cake was never going to be consistent enough, on its own, to carry the whole business.